My name is Bob Lawman, and what we're covering is pre- and post-trip inspections of commercial vehicles. Generally, what the drivers need is a knowledge of the things to look for when they inspect their truck, both when they before they start their workday and when they end. Those things include not only paperwork in the truck, but the equipment, which includes the braking system, steering system, suspension, load securement, and anything else that could affect safety. So that's what I want to do is let you know how they're going to look at it. Your mechanics are going to look at it differently because they're mechanics. I'm going to look at it differently than you do because I'm not a driver. I'm a DOT enforcement guy. My role now, though, is to keep you out of trouble instead of catching you in trouble. The first things that we're going to look for are the fire extinguisher, and this one is not secured the way it should be. And it is charged up, so that's good. Okay, you need to check the emergency reflectors, which are right here. Check and make sure that that all three of them are in there and that they're all in good shape like those ones seem to be. They'll have you, they could do a number of things. Make sure the windshield wipers are working. Make sure you got fluid in there. And you need to check this stuff. If you're are you in the same truck every day generally?
We try to be.
Okay. So usually you're going to pretty well know your truck, but check anyway. Make sure you got windshield washer fluid in there. Make sure your wipers actually work. They're going to want the horn. That's all pretty simple stuff. You either need the city horn or the air horn, either one. It doesn't matter. As long as one of them works, you're good. They're going to look for just the basic stuff first of all. They'll look for proof of insurance, registration, license, medical card, and your logbook.
Annual DOT inspection.
And your annual DOT inspection. Make sure you have your DOT inspection with you.
And
you have the sticker? Will they still ask for the sheet most of the time, or just if you got the sticker?
They want one or the other. Now, you do run into some times when they will ask you. I've had some cases where DOT officers have told drivers that no, either the sticker or the paper isn't any good, you got to have the other one. They're wrong if they tell you
I was
that.
going to say, what other one is there?
You can have the sticker or the paper or both.
Okay.
The headlights, both high and low beam, the turn signals, emergency flashers, the four-way flashers. At least 3 lights on top of the cab, and there should be 3 marker lights on the back of each truck too that work. If the truck has more lights than that, they're not required lights, so at least 3 of them should be working.
On the back truck or trailer, do we have to have a 3-light cluster?
Yes, there's got to be.
That works.
Yes, they have. It's not an out of service, but they're required to work.
That designates us as a truck. That's what I remember.
They're called identification lights, so people can more easily identify you as a truck. Yes, at night. The other thing you got to make sure that works in the back is it's silly, but the license plate light. That's a violation. The only lights that need to work are the required lights. A lot of times you hear that every light has to work. That's not right. If you get written up for that, like if one of those lights up there is out, and the other 4 or 3 of them work at least, and they write you up for that, let us know about it. Take a picture of it or whatever you can do. We can get those violations removed. The condition of the tires, at least 4 30-second tread depth on the steering tires, 2 30-second tread depth everywhere else. They'll check for bald spots. You see a lot of tires that have bald spots around them. Mm-hmm. If there's any cord showing, it's an out of service. If you have a tire that's less than 50% tire pressure than it should be, they consider it a flat tire. That's an out of service. So check your tires and don't just, if there's any question, don't just go around bumping your tires. I mean, you can get a pretty good idea, but it's not going to tell you exactly. If it seems like it's low, make sure you know what the deal is and get some air in it. Make sure there's no damage to the tire. either on the tread or the side walls. The lug nuts all need to be tight. No cracks in the wheel. Make sure there's no leaking from the hub right here. This has a little bit of oil, but it's not a leak. There's no fresh oil there, so it's really not a problem. But if there is fresh oil coming out of that, it'd need to be fixed. It's not an out of service, but it should be watched.
Okay, it's out of service if your tread depth isn't deep enough too, right?
It's not an out of service violation, but it's something you ought to get fixed here before you go out.
Right.
If they stop you on the road, if the DOT folks stop you and your tread depth is low, they'll write you up for it, but it's not an out of service. They'll check the depth of your, the thickness of your brake shoes. They'll look as good as they can at the brake drums, see if they can see any cracks there. They'll check, eventually they're going to check your brakes if they're doing a level 1 for a lot of different things. How much push rod travel do they allow? Do you remember? Do you know?
Inch and a half or 2 inches, wasn't it? Or inch and a half.
Depends on your brake chamber size.
It depends on the brake chamber size. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's important to check any leaf springs like these ones, or any type of springs it has on it. Make sure these U-bolts are all tight. You can generally tell if the nuts are loose or if the U-bolt is loose. If those are loose, it is an out of service violation. Any parts of the suspension like these right here, you can check and make sure they're tight. If not, it's a problem. You can also check, these are brake cans, and the air line's going to the brake cans. Just check those to make sure they look good. There's no leaks, there's no loose parts, anything like that. Cracks in these leaf springs. Smaller leaf springs, a lot of times you'll find some cracks in them. On these things, they're going to look at all these air lines, every single one of these, for each brake. They're going to check your airbags. If your airbags are leaking, you know, if the axles are down, airbags, they'll check that stuff. If these axles are not on the ground, they probably won't look very close at them. If you're loaded, you probably have them down, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay. So they'll be checking all the brakes and all the air lines and everything on each one of these. You want to check these U-bolts, make sure they're all tight, because these are what holds the whole bed on. Any type of oil leaks in the hydraulic system like this, anything like that you want to pay attention to. Check the lights on the back of the truck. Make sure they're all working. The out of service items on the back of the truck would be brake lights and turn signals. If they're not working, the truck shouldn't be used. Reflective tape, like you see along the sides of this bed, should all be there. Also, reflective tape on the back of the bumper, like this one has. It does have some dirt on it, but the tape is still visible, so that's okay. Mud flaps, like we mentioned over there, the mud flaps shouldn't be more than 10 inches off the ground. Make sure they're in good shape in there so you don't throw rocks and hit people. What they're going to do underneath here is they're going to check your brake cans, all the air lines going in and out of them. They'll look for air leaks. They will make sure the cans are tight. You know, the pins and everything that hold the whole brake system together down in there with the slack adjuster and all that, they'll check all that. It's not uncommon to find ones that have come loose, especially with automatic slack adjusters. They'll look at those. And like I say, if you got a brake out of adjustment and you got automatic slack adjusters, you got 2 violations, not 1. So do the best you can to make sure those are good. These have the covers on the brakes, so they'll be looking in there with their flashlight to see, you know, check the brake shoes and all that. They'll look at the suspension if they can find any loose U-bolts. A loose U-bolt on your leaf springs will put you out of service. Keep an eye on those. It's easy to see if they're loose. I mean, you don't even have to feel them. You can tell if they're loose just looking at them. This one's damaged, but it's not loose, so it's not a violation. It doesn't look very good, but it's not a violation. If it is loose, then you need to get some new bolts or whatever you need to tighten it up. Watch, this is an air reservoir. You can check the air lines and make sure they're not rubbing on anything. This air line right here actually looks like it's been kinked. Right here there's a spot where it's been kinked a little bit. You want to check that for any other damage. That could be a DOT violation. Your fuel tanks, including the cap, make sure there's no leaks. If any of the lines going in and out of the tank are leaking, you'll generally see it off the bottom of the tank, so it's a good idea to check there. Make sure there's no fuel leaks. Where you want to check on this type of a tank for any type of fuel leaks up in here. A lot of times you find them here. Also on these loose bands on the fuel tank are an out of service violation, so make sure everything's tight. If something looks loose, they need to be taking a look at that. This is a good example of the exhaust system. You can look underneath here, and especially on any bands like here, any place in these flex tubes, flex lines here, make sure there's no exhaust leaks there, and you can see the black marks when there is a leak. There's none there. But it's important to watch the brakes. Make sure while you're looking underneath there that the brake shoes are not less than 1/4 of an inch. Make sure there's not too much of a gap between the shoes and the drums. Make sure there's no cracking in any of the drums or brake shoes, anything like that. And generally just look for loose parts, anything that might affect your braking. What it should be is if the wheel oil is leaking out of there and getting into your drum, then it's a defective brake, is what that is. Yes?
Do we, as drivers, can we adjust our brakes by ourselves, or we gotta have the
Unless you have
The-
a mechanic
deal?
The code says that you have to be certified to adjust your brakes.
I have a card that says I can adjust my brakes.
Okay, then adjust them buggers up.
How do we obtain one?
Gotta go to school.
You gotta go to, you gotta have some kind of training to do that. And if that's something the company wants to do, we'd have to look into that. I don't know.
So is the one I got 20 years ago still good?
Sure. The one thing you want to be careful of, most of your trucks are probably new enough that they have self-adjusters on them. If that slack adjuster isn't working right, it's not just a brake out of adjustment. If they find your brakes out of adjustment with automatic slack adjusters, you got 2 violations. One, because the brake's out of adjustment. The other one is because the slack adjuster's not working. So what do you do when they pull you in for an inspection? One good thing to do is just push on the brake. I mean, push that sucker down about 3 times before they get a chance to look at it. That should tighten up your slack adjusters, shouldn't it?
Should, if it's working right.
If
but
it's
they shouldn't
working
have been out even then before you pulled in.
That's right. What they're going to do, one thing they're going to do when they're going around your truck is they're going to look for air leaks. They're going to listen. A lot of times, and you know darn well, they're not going to hear all the air leaks then. When you step on the brake and they're underneath there marking things, they're going to be listening again, because, you know, then you got air to the whole system, and you're going to hear a lot of things you don't hear otherwise. If they hear an air leak, and it's up to them, if it sounds like a serious enough air leak to them, they're going to have you get your air pressure up to about 90 pounds. So let the truck idle and then just step on the brake and hold it. I mean, push it all the way down and hold it. Then they're going to watch your air gauge, and if you can't hold air pressure, under those circumstances, they're going to say you're out of service because you're not holding air pressure. During a DOT inspection, they'll also look into the hood. Underneath the hood, you want to look for, this is the air line going to the brake can on the front. You want to look for any damage. This is actually a cover on the air line, so look for any damage underneath there. Any signs of leaking, like sometimes you'll find wear in here where they connect to the can. Look for anything there. You can look down inside here and check the brake drum, the brake shoes. You can check these parts right here to make sure this is the slack adjuster. Make sure none of these parts are loose, the pin here or any of that, so the thing is working right. Again, check all the U-bolts for the suspension, any kind of cracks in these in the leaf springs. Look for any type of leaking in here, the turbo, the exhaust system. They're going to check for your steering wheel movement. They'll probably have you sit up in there and they'll have you turn your steering wheel. And what they'll do is they'll just watch in there to see if there's any movement in these ball joints down here, in any in here in your steering gear, or any of these ball joints, anything like that.
U-joints on the steering shafts.
Yep, U-joints. That's a big one, is the U-joints, especially down at Willard. Somebody mentioned Willard. They love U-joints down there. The windshield is not an out-of-service violation, but it is a violation. So if it's cracked, you ought to be getting it replaced.
Anywhere.
Anywhere. If you have to get by with it and it's not in your line of sight, if you have to get by for a few days, that's probably okay. But I wouldn't push it past that.
It happens a lot in these. You get whack during
Yeah.
the day, during the work days.
Sure. Yeah, and if you have to run the rest of the day and get it replaced that night or next morning, whatever, that's fine. I wouldn't hold up the whole operation for a cracked windshield.
Well, no,
But
What if they intersect? What if the crack intersects? Or it is in your line of sight?
then it's still not an out of service, but it is a violation. Make sure you get them fixed though, especially if they write you up on an inspection. Get them fixed before you go out the next day. That's the requirement. DOT's requirement.
Mirrors? Any requirements on mirrors?
Mirrors, yeah, you got to have them.
What about the glass in them?
That too.
That is a good question.
Yeah, you got to have mirrors and be able to see out both sides. If you got a wide load, if you're hauling equipment, you should have extensions on there so you can see down the sides of that equipment. I don't know, you probably do all big stuff, don't you?
They have them now.
Travis got 'em.
Okay,
They harassed us a little bit.
and that can be an out of service for not having those. This is the steering gear. You want to make sure everything's right there, that there's no leaks around this seal right here or anywhere else in the steering system. All these ball joints down in here, make sure they look good. Don't have anything loose there. Again, check the air lines going to your brake can. Check for any kind of a fuel leak, any moisture up in here that might indicate there's a fuel leak, which is an out of service. And again, check the brake drums, brake shoes, all the brake parts up in here. You need to watch, just like any trailer, is the coupling device to make sure it's in good shape and working right. With a pintle hitch like this one, and this is an old and rusty, but you want to watch these both on the trailer, which this part is, and on the truck that it's being hooked to watch for wear. If there's too much wear on here, it's an out of service violation. The other thing you want to watch for is that there hasn't been any repairs, usually in the form of welding on there. On a pintle hitch like this one, it's not legal to try to repair those by welding because it makes the metal brittle and they're not safe. So if there's been any repairs like that, it's an out of service violation. Shouldn't be used, the hitch has to be replaced. The most common violations that are found in DOT inspections are brake problems, any kind of an air leak, or defective brakes of any kind, which could include brakes out of adjustment, automatic slack adjusters not working right, contaminated brakes, that means brakes contaminated by leaking oil, anything like that. The other biggest violation are tires, which could include flat tires, meaning anything less than 50 pounds, 50% of the normal pressure. It could also include low tread depth, below either 4/32 on the steering or 2/32 on the other tires, or damage to sidewalls is a common one. Also uneven tire wear. Exhaust leaks are common. It's important to check for operable low air warning devices in the cab. That's a common violation, and it's a requirement. It can be an out of service if that doesn't work right. Broken windshields, and again, if that is a windshield that can wait till the end of the day, that's fine. It should be replaced though as soon as it can. Those are probably the most common violations, other than unsecured loads, which includes loose gravel, anything like that on the truck that can fall off and damage other vehicles. So it's a good idea to make sure that stuff is kept clean. One other violation that you need to pay close attention to is any air lines in your braking system that are rubbing on anything, have any wear at all in them. They need to be looked at closely and possibly replaced. If there's any leaks in air lines, that's also an out-of-service violation, and it's a common violation related to the brakes. Lights are common violations on big trucks. On smaller trucks, there's some other issues that we'll probably talk about somewhere else. Those are probably the most common ones, and they're the ones that are really easy to be identified and easily fixed if they're found.